Let me bring Stephen into this. Stephen, you want to interject?
I hope you noticed that the chess master just got checkmated. Did you there? You didn't notice that? Look, let me address your attention to what the elephant in the room we haven't mentioned. All this embracing of Russia in the 1990s, all this wonderful things we did for them, but weren't we also expanding NATO toward their borders? And you say, so what? Okay, so I come over, I find out where you live, and I park all my military equipment across the street. And I say, I'm just here for your security. I'm making sure nobody breaks in your house. And then I notice that you brought a few other folks along, and they've got all their military equipment in my backyard too. And then you're suddenly in my soft underbelly in the South in Georgia. But don't worry, this is for your security. And by the way, NATO is about democracy, and you need democracy. All right, let's be serious. We were warned and warned and warned by the Russians we liked in Russia, the liberals even, and Gary knows this, were worried about this, and came to Washington and said, you're pushing too far. Eventually, wait a minute, don't use up my time, eventually, rightly or wrongly, but perception is everything in politics. The Russian political elite decided that this expansion of NATO was a way of making sure Russia would forever be a subservient state to the West. And that the brass ring, well, the silver ring was Georgia, and there was a proxy war there because of this in 2008, but the brass ring was always been Ukraine. It's spoken openly in Washington. Now, be honest, if you think this is a good policy, if you believe we should push our power as close to Russia as we can, bring Ukraine into the Western security system because it's good for us, then say so. And then let's debate that issue. But let's don't go on about the demon Putin and the rest, because the reality is that the Russian understanding of what Ukraine is about is what NATO expansion has been about from the beginning, and that the Ukrainian crisis arose because, rightly or wrongly, the Russian political class believed that NATO was on its way not only to Kiev, but to Crimea. Now, we can say it's crazy, but perception is politics, is everything. And you want to be safe in this world, you isolate Russia, they're going to perceive us in an even more extreme form, and we will never be safe.
Okay, let's go to Anne on this rebuttal on NATO.
I'll say it as you invited me, Mr. Cohen, it's crazy. First of all, number one, why did NATO expansion happen? Let's tick back the clock again to the 1990s. Who did it come from? Who wanted it? It was the Central Europeans who wanted it, who asked for it. Initially, it was not an American idea. It was a Central European idea, and I remember because I was in Warsaw when that happened and when it first came up. Why did the Central Europeans wanted it? They wanted it because they were afraid. They were afraid of Russia even then. They saw what Russia was becoming. Very reluctantly, the United States agreed to expand a security zone so that 100 million people would be able to make a transition to democracy, begin economic development and growth without fear of invasion. And it worked. It was unbelievably successful.
It worked?
It worked for the Central Europeans. Yes. 100 million people were safe. You know, a region that had been the source of 2 world wars has not been a source of conflict since then. How did we do it? It was carried out in a manner designed to reassure Russia from the beginning. Russia was included in every piece of negotiation. No NATO bases were ever placed in the new member states. Until 2013, no exercises were ever conducted in the new member states. In response to Russian objections, and this is a very important point, both Ukraine and Georgia were openly and definitively denied NATO membership in 2008, and that has been repeated ever since, and it is not on the table now. What are you looking at me like that?
In 2008, it was stated by the...
In 2008, there was a NATO meeting, and they said there will be no membership plan for Ukraine and Georgia. It isn't happening. And since then, it hasn't been on the table, and it's not an issue.
Well, they said something else in 2008. They said something else at that meeting in 2008.
We seem to remember a different event.
No, I don't remember it differently. I read it the other night. Well, you won't let me finish the sentence, so how can I tell you? They said, however, NATO membership remains open to Georgia and Ukraine if they qualify.
And it remains open to Russia as well.
You said theoretically?
It remains open to Russia as well.
Please.
The point is, of course it's open to
come in on this. I know this isn't something you feel strongly about.
No, it was turned down. Wait, and I haven't finished with my last point. And what's been happening since then? In this long period of time, while Russia was rebuilding its military, while it was invading one neighbor after another, the American army was drawing down its European forces, so much so that by 2013, there was not one single American tank in Europe. This is an aggressive policy. There is no way that Putin believed in a genuine military threat from NATO. This is something that he has been using at home as a way to consolidate his power.
Okay, let's go to Vladimir. I'll come to you, okay?